Commander Jake Reynolds slumped against the cold metal wall of the medical bay, his combat suit torn and stained with blood. Some of it was his own. Most of it belonged to the Kreth warriors he had killed in the last 6 hours of brutal fighting. His hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette, but the lighter kept slipping from his fingers. The battle for Station Meridian had been hell. The Kreth swarm came without warning, thousands of insect-like creatures with razor-sharp claws and acid blood. Jake's human platoon of 50 soldiers had held the eastern corridor while 3 allied alien species retreated through the evacuation tunnels. 50 humans against an endless tide of monsters. Only 32 humans walked away. Jake closed his eyes and tried not to think. About the faces of the 18 who did not make it. Thompson, who talked about his daughter every single day. Martinez, who made terrible jokes even when the situation was desperate. Chen, who saved Jake's life by throwing herself in front of a Kreth Blade Master. The medical bay doors hissed open. Jake did not bother to look up. Probably another doctor wanting to check his wounds. He had 3 broken ribs, a deep cut across his left shoulder, and enough bruises to paint a sunset. But he was alive, and that felt wrong when so many were not. Commander Reynolds. The voice was deep and resonant, like thunder rolling across mountains. Jake opened his eyes and immediately sat up straighter, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs. Standing in the doorway was Zarinth, a Valorian warrior. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her body covered in interlocking plates of ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished silver. The Valorians were the Coalition's elite fighters. Known across 100 worlds for their strength and their unbreakable sense of honor, Zarinth was particularly famous. She had killed a Kreth broodmother in single combat 3 years ago, something most people thought was impossible. Zarinth, Jake said, struggling to his feet. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. You made it out, 'cause of you, she said, stepping into the room. Her armor made soft clinking sounds as she moved. Your platoon held the corridor. My unit reached the evacuation ships. 17 Valorian warriors lived because of human sacrifice. Jake waved his hand dismissively. Just doing our job. Alliance protocols say we cover retreating forces. You would have done the same for us. Zarinth tilted her head, studying him with eyes that glowed faint amber in the dim light. Valorian eyes always glowed. Some humans found it unsettling. Jake had gotten used to it during his 3 years in the Coalition forces. Zarinth said simply, Valorian doctrine prioritizes strength preservation. We do not sacrifice elite warriors to save lesser forces. Your species thinks differently. This saved my life. She took another step closer. Jake suddenly felt very small, very tired, and very aware that his cigarette had fallen somewhere on the floor. I owe you a debt, Commander Reynolds. In Valorian culture, this debt must be repaid. I offer you anything within my power to give. Speak your desire, and if it can be done, I will do it. Jake blinked. The exhaustion was catching up with him. The adrenaline that had kept him moving through the battle was gone, replaced by a bone-deep weariness that made thinking difficult. He knew Valorians took their honor seriously, but this seemed excessive. Anything? He asked, and something about the way he said it made it sound like a joke. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the shock finally hitting him. Maybe he just needed to laugh to keep from screaming. Anything, Zarinth confirmed, placing her right hand over her heart in the Valorian gesture of absolute oath. You saved my life. My honor demands repayment. Name your price. Jake's mind was foggy. He should probably ask for something reasonable. Advanced weapons technology. Medical supplies for his platoon. A month of shore leave. But the words that came out of his mouth were not any of those things. You, Jake said, and then he laughed weakly. I want you. As a friend? Someone who does not run away when things get bad. That would be nice. The joke fell completely flat. Zarantha's glowing eyes widened. Her hand remained pressed over her heart, but her other hand moved to the seals on her shoulder armor. With a series of metallic clicks, she began removing her armor plating. Right, Jake said, the fog in his brain clearing instantly. What are you doing? Accepting your claim, Zaranth said calmly. removing the shoulder plate and setting it carefully on the floor. You have invoked the claim of bond. I am answering the what. Jake pushed himself away from the wall, fully alert now, despite his injuries. I was joking. I did not mean it literally. Zaranth paused, her hands on the chest plate seals. She looked at Jake with an expression he could not quite read. Confusion, maybe? Or disappointment? Valorians do not joke about bonds, she said slowly. When you offer anything and someone claims you, this is sacred. I remove my armor to show trust. To show that I place my life in your hands as you placed yours in mine. But I did not. Jake started, then stopped. Other Valorian warriors were gathering outside the medical bay, watching through the windows. He could see their glowing eyes in the corridor. Word was spreading fast. If you retract your claim now, Zaranth said quietly, you dishonor both of us. I offered a debt freely. You claimed payment. To refuse me now says my oath means nothing. It says human words mean nothing. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. This was spinning out of control. He opened his mouth to explain human sarcasm, human humor, the way humans sometimes said things they did not mean. But before he could speak, the station's emergency alarms began wailing. The ship's AI voice echoed through every corridor. Alert. Long-range sensors detect Kreth mothership approaching. Estimated arrival for hours. All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill, Zaranth finished, removing her chest plate. Underneath, she wore a simple combat suit similar to Jake's. Without her armor, she looked smaller, more vulnerable, more human in a strange way. Valorian law is clear, she said, meeting Jake's eyes. I am now your shield twin. Where you go, I go. Your survival is now more important than my own. Your battles are my battles, until death separates us, or until you release me from this bond. Jake stared at her, his mind racing. A Kreth mothership was coming. People were about to die. And somehow, through a stupid joke made while delirious from blood loss, he had just bound himself to one of the Coalition's most deadly warriors. This is going to be complicated, Jake muttered. And she picked up her weapons from where she had set them beside her armor. Yes, she agreed. But you claimed me, and I do not break my oaths. Ever. The alarms continued to wail as Jake realized his life had just become far more complicated than any Kreth battle. Part 2. Bonded in battle, Jake spent the next hour trying to explain human humor to Zaranth. It did not go well. They sat in the station's armory, preparing weapons for the coming battle. Jake cleaned his rifle while Zaranth sharpened her twin plasma blades. Around them, other soldiers rushed to prepare defenses. Nobody had time to care about one human and one Valorian having an awkward conversation. So humans say things they do not mean? Zaranth asked, running her blade across the sharpening stone. The sound was rhythmic and somehow calming despite the chaos around them. Sometimes, Jake said, when we are tired or stressed or trying to make each other laugh, it is called sarcasm or joking. Why? Jake paused. It was a good question. Why did humans joke? Because laughter helps us deal with fear, with pain. When things are terrible, a joke reminds us that life is not always terrible. Zaranth considered this for a long moment. Valorians do not have this. Our words are always truth. Deception, even in small forms, is the greatest dishonor. If I say something, I mean it. Always. Your entire species evolved without sarcasm. We evolved without the need for it. When you are the strongest predator on your world, you do not need to deceive. You simply state truth and enforce it with strength. Jake thought about that. It explained a lot about Valorian culture. Their obsession with honor, their rigid hierarchies, their absolute literal interpretation of language. They had built an entire civilization on the idea that words always matched reality, which made his joke into something far more serious than he intended. I am sorry, Jake said finally. I did not mean to bind you to anything. In human culture, what I said was meaningless, just exhausted rambling. But in my culture, it was everything, Zaranth replied. She set down her blade and looked at him directly. I cannot undo this, Jake. The bond is witnessed. Other warriors saw, if I break it now, I become outcast, honorless. I would rather die. The alarm suddenly changed pitch. The AI voice returned. Kreth mothership entering weapons range. All fighters, 2 defensive positions. Infantry, prepare for boarding actions. Jake grabbed his rifle and stood. Zaranth gathered her weapons with practiced efficiency. They moved toward the corridor where Jake's remaining platoon was assembling. But as they walked, Jake noticed something strange. Zaranth kept positioning herself between him and every doorway, every corner, every potential threat. She was treating him like he was fragile, like he needed constant protection. "Stop that," Jake said as they reached the assembly point. "Stop what?" "Walking ahead of me, blocking every sight line." "I am a soldier, not a child." Zaranth looked genuinely confused. "I am your shield twin. Protecting you is now my primary function. This is how the bond works." "That is not how partnerships work in human culture," Jake said firmly. "Partners protect each other, equally, both ways. Makes no tactical sense. I am stronger, faster, more durable. Logic dictates I should absorb damage meant for you." Before Jake could respond, the station shuddered. The Kreth had begun their assault. The next 3 hours were pure chaos. The Kreth boarding parties cut through the station's hull in a dozen places. Insect warriors flooded the corridors, their mandibles clicking, their acid blood eating through metal where it spilled. Jake's platoon held the main junction near the reactor core, the most critical defensive position on the station, and Zaranth fought like nothing Jake had ever seen. She moved through Kreth warriors like a storm, her plasma blades leaving trails of superheated air. Where Jake's bullets could kill 1 Kreth at a time, Zaranth's blades could cut through 3 or 4 in a single strike. She was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, but she was also reckless. Jake watched in horror as a sprint threw herself in front of a Kreth Blade Master's strike that had been aimed at him. The creature's bone sword scraped across her armor, leaving a deep gouge. Zaranth killed it instantly, but she had taken damage she did not need to take. Jake shouted over the gunfire. Zaranth did not respond. She was already moving to intercept another attack coming his direction. It happened again and again. Every time a Kreth got close to Jake, Zaranth was there. She took hits meant for him. She positioned herself as a living shield, and Jake realized with growing anger that she was going to get herself killed. Trying to protect him, the moment came during a brief lull in the fighting. The Kreth pulled back to regroup. Jake grabbed Zaranth's arm and pulled her into a side corridor. "You need to stop," he said, breathing hard. "Stop. What?" Zarantha's armor was scorched and dented. Green Kreth blood covered her from head to toe. "Is sacrificing yourself for me. That is not what I want. That is not what this bond should be." "But it is what the bond is," Zaranth said simply. Shield twins protect their bonded above all else, even above their own life. "This is honor. This is duty. This is suicide." Jake's voice cracked. He had watched 18 of his soldiers die today already. He could not watch someone else throw their life away. Not even for him. Especially not for him. "Why do you care?" Zaranth asked. "I am alien. I am simply following my culture's ways." "Is that not what you want? For me to be who I am?" "I want you to survive." Jake shouted. "I want you to fight smart, not recklessly." I want the words died in his throat. Because he realized what he wanted. He wanted her alive. Not because she was a useful warrior. Not because of some honor bond. But because in the few hours since this insane situation began, he had started to actually care about her. The ceiling above them exploded. A Kreth shock trooper, bigger than the others, dropped through the hole. Its blade was already swinging toward Jake's head. There was no time to raise his rifle. No time to dodge. Zaranth moved faster than thought. But instead of blocking the blade with her body, Jake moved too. He tackled Zaranth sideways, throwing both of them clear of the strike. They hit the floor hard as the corridor behind them erupted in flames from a plasma grenade someone threw. They rolled clear together. Jake came up first, his rifle spitting bullets into the Kreth trooper's eyes. Zarinth rose beside him, her blades flashing. Together they cut the creature down. When it was over, they stood there breathing hard, covered in blood and soot. Other Valorian warriors appeared at the end of the corridor. They had seen everything. Zarinth stared at Jake with an expression he could not read. "You saved me," she said quietly. "That is what partners do," Jake replied. "No." Zarinth shook her head slowly. "Shield twins do not work that way. The bond flows one direction. From protector to protected. What you did. That is not supposed to happen." One of the other Valorian warriors, a male named Krevthar, stepped forward. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. "The human protected his shield twin," Krevthar said. "I have never seen this before." "It violates the hierarchy," another Valorian said. "The stronger always protects the weaker. This is law, and maybe the law's wrong," Jake said, before he could stop himself. Silence. The Valorian warriors stared at him. Humans did not question Valorian law. Ever. But Zarinth did something unexpected. She laughed. It was a small sound, rough and unpracticed, as if her throat did not quite know how to make it. But it was definitely a laugh. "Maybe it is," she said softly. The station's AI interrupted them. Kreth forces retreating. Victory confirmed. All personnel begin damage assessment. The battle was over. They had one. But as Jake looked at Zarinth, her armor dented and scarred, her eyes still glowing in the dim emergency lighting, he realized something important had changed between them, and he had a feeling the Valorian High Council was not going to like it. Part 3. The human exception, the Valorian High Council arrived 3 days after the battle. Their ship was massive, a warship that made Station Meridian look like a child's toy. Jake watched it dock through the observation window, his stomach twisting with anxiety. "They're here to judge us," Zarinth said beside him. She wore fresh armor, polished to mirror brightness. She looked every inch the legendary warrior. But Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. The council does not travel unless something important is at stake. Important like executing a human for accidentally mocking Valorian traditions. Jake asked. He tried to keep his voice light, but the fear was real. He had spent 3 days reading everything he could about Valorian law. The more he learned, the worse it looked. "They will not execute you," Zarinth said. "Probably. Maybe they will exile you. Or force me to break the bond and accept exile instead." "That is not reassuring." Zarinth almost smiled. She had been doing that more often in the last few days. Small expressions that suggested she was learning things from him, just as he was learning from her. "I know, but it is truth. I will not lie to you, Jake. Not now. Not ever." 2 hours later, Jake stood in the station's main conference hall before 5 of the most intimidating beings he had ever seen. The Valorian High Council members were all elderly warriors, their armor decorated with honors from 100 battles. They sat in a semicircle, elevated above the floor, so they looked down on Jake like judges at a trial, which he supposed they were. Zarinth stood beside him, silent and still. Valorian law said she could not defend him. She could only answer questions truthfully. Her honor forbade her from lying, even to save him. The Central Council member, a scarred warrior named Krevthar, who Jake had seen during the battle, spoke first. Human Commander Jake Reynolds, you stand accused of mockery of the sacred claim of bond. How do you answer? Jake took a deep breath. He had prepared for this. I do not deny that I answered Zarantha's offer, but I did not mock anything. I misunderstood your customs because humans communicate differently. Explain, Krevthar commanded. So Jake explained. He talked about human humor, about sarcasm, about how humans sometimes said things they did not mean as a way to cope with trauma and fear. He explained that his words were meant as a joke between warriors, not a serious claim. He spoke carefully, knowing that every word mattered. The council listened in silence. When Jake finished, one of them, a female warrior named Sharvex, leaned forward. So you claim your words were false? That you did not mean what you said? Not false, Jake corrected quickly. Just not literal. I did want Zarence's friendship. I just did not want to bind her to an oath she did not choose freely. But she did choose, Sharvek said. She offered anything. You claimed her? She accepted. All of this was witnessed. Where is the lack of choice? Jake struggled to find the right words. In human culture, an offer like that is not meant literally. It is a polite gesture, a show of gratitude. We expect people to ask for something reasonable, not for the person themselves. Then your culture is built on deception, another council member said coldly. You say words you do not mean. You make offers you do not intend to honor. This is deeply dishonorable, Jake said, knowing he was taking a huge risk. Your culture is built on being so rigid that you cannot adapt to new situations. Shocked silence filled the hall. You did not insult the Valorian High Council. Ever. But Jake was tired of dancing around the truth. If they were going to exile him, he might as well be honest. Krevthar's eyes blazed brighter. You dare. Yes, I dare, Jake interrupted. Because you are asking me to destroy a good warrior's life over a cultural misunderstanding. Zarenth did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. We just come from different worlds with different rules. And instead of finding a way to make this work, you want to punish us for not being perfect? The law is clear, Sharvek said. Bonds are hierarchical. The strong protect the weak. The weak obey the strong. This is how civilization functions. No, Jake said flatly. That is how your civilization functions. Human civilization works differently. We believe partners should be equals. That strength comes from mutual respect, not domination. A foolish belief, the cold council member said, which is why humans are weak. Your species barely survived first contact with the Kreth. Without the coalition, you would be extinct. And yet Krevthar said slowly, silencing the other council member, human forces held the corridor when 3 Valorian units retreated. Human tactics saved 17 of our warriors. Weakness does not do this. He stood, his armor creaking. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Krevthar walked down from his elevated seat until he stood directly in front of Jake. Commander Reynolds, I will ask you a direct question. Answer truthfully. Do you wish to dissolve this bond with Zarenth? Jake glanced at Zarenth. She stood perfectly still, her face expressionless. But he could see the tension in her hands, the way her fingers curled slightly. She was terrified. If he said yes, she would lose everything. Her honor, her position, possibly her life. But if he said no, he would be bound to her forever by laws he did not understand. In ways he could not predict, Jake thought about the last 3 days. About fighting beside her, about watching her laugh for the first time, about the way she had started asking him questions about human culture, genuine curiosity replacing rigid certainty, about how she had saved his life a dozen times and how he had saved hers. No, Jake said clearly. I do not wish to dissolve the bond. Kreftor's eyes narrowed. Why not? This bond inconveniences you. It places demands on you. It forces you to accept responsibility for another warrior's oath. Why accept this burden? Because, Jake said, choosing his words carefully, Zarenth is a good warrior and a good person. In the 3 days since this bond began, we have fought well together. We have saved each other's lives. We have started to understand each other. That is worth keeping. But you claim to want her as an equal, not as a shield twin, Sharvek said. This concept does not exist in our law. Bonds are always hierarchical. Someone must lead. Someone must follow and make a new law, Jake said. I claimed Zarenth as my equal partner, not my shield, not my subordinate, my equal. If your laws cannot handle that, then change the laws. The council members looked at each other. Jake could not read their expressions. He might have just sentenced himself and Zarenth to exile. Or worse. Finally, Krefthar spoke. The council will consider this. But understand, human, that what you propose has never been done. Equal partnerships do not exist in Valorian culture. We do not have words for this concept. We do not have traditions for this. You are asking us to create something entirely new. Yes, Jake said simply. I am. Why should we? Give me one reason why we should change 10,000 years of tradition for one human and one Valorian. Jake thought about how to answer that. Then he remembered something from the battle. Because our equal partnership killed that Kreth shock trooper in the corridor, the one that none of your warriors could bring down alone. Zaranth and I killed it together, fighting as equals, and we did it faster and cleaner than any hierarchical team could have. Krefthar was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The council will debate this, but I propose a trial. Commander Reynolds, Zaranth, you will undertake a mission together. If you succeed fighting as equals, we will study this human concept. We will consider whether it has value. But if you fail, Commander Reynolds will be removed from coalition forces, and Zaranth will face exile for dishonoring our traditions. Do you accept these terms? Jake looked at Zaranth again. This time, she looked back. There was a question in her eyes. Are you sure? He nodded slightly. I am sure we accept, they said together. Krevthar smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Good. Your mission begins in 12 hours. I suggest you prepare well. Very few warriors survive what you are about to attempt. As the council dismissed them, Jake and Zaranth walked out of the hall together. Neither spoke until they were alone in the corridor. You should have let me break the bond, Zaranth said quietly. Now we are both at risk. Partners share risk, Jake replied. That is how equality works. Zaranth was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. I am frightened, Jake. I have fought Kreth broodmothers. I have led charges against impossible odds. But this, being equal to someone, having someone care if I survive, ... This frightens me more than any battle. Jake understood, because he felt the same way. We will figure it out, he said. Together, Zaranth repeated. The words sounded strange in her mouth, but she was trying. And that, Jake thought, is what partnership really meant. Part 4. The impossible mission. That mission briefing was short and brutal. Jake and Zaranth stood in the intelligence center, staring at the holographic display of a Kreth breeding station. The structure was massive, a twisted biological horror that looked more like a diseased organ than a building. It floated in deep space, pulsing with unnatural light. This is Hive 7, the intelligence officer explained. She was a Teleron, a species known for their analytical minds. Her four eyes blinked independently as she manipulated the hologram. It produces approximately 10,000 Kreth warriors per standard cycle. Destroying it would significantly damage the Kreth war effort in this sector. What is the defense situation? Jake asked, studying the structure. He saw hundreds of weapon emplacements, patrol patterns, shield generators. It looked impossible. Heavy, the officer said bluntly. The station maintains active defenses at all times. Previous intelligence estimates gave any assault force a 12% survival rate. That was for a full combat team of 20 elite warriors. You are too. Zaranth leaned closer to the display. What is our objective? The officer highlighted a point deep inside the station. The central breeding chamber. You must infiltrate, plant this dimensional disruptor device, and escape before it detonates. The explosion will collapse the station into subspace. Total destruction. How long do we have after planting the device? Jake asked. For minutes. Maybe 5 if you are lucky. How far to the nearest extraction point from the breeding chamber? 6 minutes at full sprint. Through corridors that will be full of Kreth warriors responding to the alert. Jake and Zaranth looked at each other. The math was simple and terrifying. They would need to run faster than possible through an army of Kreth, while a dimensional bomb counted down to annihilation. The council expects us to fail, Zaranth said quietly. Probably, Jake agreed. But we are not going to. They spent the next 10 hours preparing. Jake checked every piece of equipment 3 times. His rifle, his armor, his emergency medical kit. The dimensional disruptor was surprisingly small, a metal sphere about the size of a baseball. It seemed wrong that something so small could destroy something so large. Zaranth sharpened her blades and ran combat simulations. Jake watched her move through practice routines, her body flowing from strike to strike with perfect precision. She was beautiful in motion, deadly and graceful at the same time. "You are staring," Zarenth said without looking at him. "I am admiring," Jake corrected. "There is a difference, is there?" She finished her routine and turned to face him. In Valorian culture, staring at another warrior is a challenge. Admiring is not a concept we have. "Then you have been missing out," Jake said. "Humans believe you can respect someone's skill and still enjoy watching them work." Zarenth considered this. "Your species is very strange, but I think I am beginning to understand why you survived first contact with the Kreth. You find joy in unexpected places. Even before a suicide mission, it is not a suicide mission if we plan to survive. Do we plan to survive?" "Yes," Jake said firmly. "We do." The infiltration began badly. Their stealth ship, a small Teleron scout vessel, was supposed to slip past the station's sensors undetected. Instead, the Kreth detected them immediately. Proximity alarms screamed as defense turrets locked on. They upgraded their sensors. The ship's pilot shouted, "Evasive action." The ship jinked and rolled, but it was too slow. Energy beams tore through the engines. The pilot fought for control, but they were falling toward the station's surface, trailing fire and debris. Brace for impact. Jake grabbed a harness and pulled Zarenth down beside him. The world became a chaos of screaming metal and flashing lights. Then everything went dark. Jake woke up 30 seconds later. His head throbbed, and something warm ran down his face. Blood. His own this time. He unbuckled himself and checked Zarenth. She was already awake, checking her weapons with mechanical efficiency. "Status?" Jake asked. "Armor intact. Blades functional. Minor concussion. Combat effective." She looked at him. "You are bleeding." "I'm fine. We need to move. The crash will bring Kreth warriors fast." They forced open the damaged airlock and stumbled out onto the station's surface. The breeding station was even more horrifying up close. The walls were organic, pulsing with veins that carried some kind of fluid. The air smelled like rot and copper. "The breeding chamber is 2 kilometers that way," Zarenth said, checking her wrist display. "Through 3 major Kreth hive sections. Then we better start running." They ran. Alarms wailed across the station. Kreth warriors boiled out of hatches and corridors, their mandibles clicking in rage. Jake and Zarenth fought through them, not stopping, always moving toward their objective. Jake learned something important during that run. Fighting beside Zarenth as an equal was different than having her as a shield twin. Before, she would have taken every hit meant for him. Now, she trusted him to protect himself. They moved together, covering each other's blind spots, creating openings for each other to exploit. It was like dancing. Deadly, violent dancing. They reached the breeding chamber soaked in Kreth blood. The room was massive, filled with organic pods that pulsed and writhed. Inside the pods, Jake could see Kreth larvae developing. Thousands of them. The sight made his skin crawl. There, Zarenth pointed to a massive organic structure in the center. "That is the primary neural cluster. Plant the device there." But there was a problem. The chamber was too large. The device needed to be planted in 2 locations simultaneously for maximum effect. One person could not reach both points in time. The disruptor has 2 activation nodes, Jake realized, examining the device. One person goes left, one goes right. We activate together? The chamber will be full of Kreth warriors in seconds, Zarenth said. Whoever goes left faces the main entrance. They will have to hold against the entire defensive force. Traditional Valorian tactics were clear. The stronger warrior takes the dangerous position. The weaker warrior takes the safer one. Zarenth should go left. Jake should go right, but they were not following traditional tactics anymore. I will take left, Jake said. You are faster. You can reach the exit quicker from the right position when the timer starts. No, I am more durable. I should, Zarenth. Jake looked at her directly. We are equals, which means we both make tactical decisions. Right now, My decision is better because it gives us the best chance of both surviving. Do you trust me? She hesitated. Trust did not come easily to Valorians. Their entire culture was built on hierarchy, not trust. But finally, she nodded. I trust you. Jake sprinted to the left position, Zarinth to the right. Behind them, the chamber doors exploded inward. Kreth warriors flooded in, hundreds of them. Jake slammed the first activation node into the neural cluster and pressed the trigger.
Out white.
Node 1 active. He shouted, Node 2 active. Zarinth responded from across the chamber. The device began its countdown. 4 minutes. And then Jake had to hold his position while the entire Kreth. Defensive force tried to kill him. He had never fought so hard in his life. His rifle overheated, and he dropped it, pulling his sidearm. When that ran dry, he used his combat knife. Kreth came at him in waves, their claws and mandibles tearing at his armor. He felt ribs break, felt his leg give out. But he did not fall, could not fall. Because Zarinth was counting on him to hold long enough. Across the chamber, Zarinth fought her own battle. But her position was slightly better. She cut through Kreth warriors like wheat, her blades never stopping, always moving. Jake could see her trying to fight her way toward him. Trying to help him.
Hey there.
Jake shouted. Get to the exit point. That is an order. We are equals. Zarinth shouted back. Which means I can ignore your orders. Despite everything, despite the pain and the fear and the certainty of death, Jake laughed. She was learning. 3 minutes left. Jake's armor was shredded. He could barely stand, but he was still alive. Still fighting? 2 minutes. Zarinth reached him, cutting through the final Kreth warriors between them. Together, they fought back to back, buying precious seconds. 1 minute. They ran. The chamber shook as the dimensional disruptor built toward critical mass. Reality itself began to warp around the device. 30 seconds. They reached an escape pod docking station. Jake's hands were shaking so badly he could barely work the controls. 15 seconds. The pod sealed. The launch sequence initiated. 5 seconds. The pod launched. Behind them, Hive 7 began to collapse inward. Space itself folding like crumpled paper. 0, the breeding station ceased to exist. Pulled into a dimensional rift that snapped shut with a flash of white light. Jake and Zarinth floated in the pod, both too exhausted to speak. Jake's leg was definitely broken. Maybe his arm too. He had lost count of his injuries. But he was alive. They both were. We did it, Jake said, his voice hoarse. We did, Zarinth agreed. She looked at him, her armor scorched and dented, her face covered in cuts. You held that position longer than any Valorian warrior could have. How? Because you were counting on me, Jake said simply. Partners do not let each other down. Zarinth was quiet for a long time. Then she did something Jake did not expect. She reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but for a Valorian, physical contact outside of combat was deeply meaningful. Thank you, she said softly, for treating me as an equal, for trusting me, for showing me that strength is not just about being the toughest or the strongest. It is also about being there for someone who needs you. Jake squeezed her hand gently. You are welcome. Now let us hope the Council sees it the same way. The rescue ship found them 6 hours later. As they were pulled aboard, Jake could see the Valorian Council's warship waiting. Krevithar himself stood on the landing platform, his expression unreadable. Jake and Zarinth limped off the pod together. Neither let go of the other's hand. Part 5. Evolution of Honor. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. Jake lay in a recovery pod, his broken bones being repaired by advanced Teleron medical technology. Beside him, in another pod, Zarinth underwent similar treatment. The transparent covers let them see each other as the machines worked. How many bones did you break? Zarinth asked. Her voice came through the pod's communication system, slightly distorted but clear. 7. You. 3. also cracked armor plating in 6 places. My equipment officer is very angry with me. Jake laughed, then winced as his ribs protested. Worth it, though. We destroyed a major Kreth breeding station. That is a victory worth a few broken bones. The council monitored everything through our armored cameras, Zarinth said quietly. They saw the entire mission. Every decision, every moment where we chose to fight as equals instead of following traditional hierarchy. And I do not know what they will decide. Krefthar's expression was unreadable when we arrived. That could mean approval, or it could mean condemnation. The medical pods released them 4 hours later. Jake's bones were healed, though he still felt sore. Zarinth moved with her usual grace, her injuries repaired. But something had changed between them. There was an ease now, a comfort that had not existed before. They had faced death together and survived. That created bonds stronger than any cultural tradition. I need to tell you something, Zarinth said as they walked toward their quarters. The claim of bond. When I offered you anything, when you said you wanted me, there is a tradition behind that. A deeper meaning. Jake stopped walking. What kind of deeper meaning? Zarinth looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for her. Valorians rarely showed uncertainty. The claim of bond is not just about debts or honor. It is also how Valorians identify potential mates. When someone removes their armor before another, without hostility, it is a test. Most Valorian males respond with dominance displays, challenges, attempts to establish hierarchy immediately. But I did not do that, Jake said slowly, understanding dawning. No, you apologized. You tried to explain misunderstanding. You treated me as someone whose feelings mattered. That is not how Valorian courtship works. But it is also exactly what I was hoping to find. She met his eyes. I never expected to find it with an alien. Especially not a human. Your species is physically weaker than mine. Smaller, more fragile. By Valorian standards, you should not interest me at all. But I do interest you, Jake said. It was not a question, yes, Zarinth admitted. You terrify me and fascinate me in equal measure. These past days, fighting beside you, learning from you, seeing how you think about partnership and equality, I have never experienced anything like this. Valorians do not have word for what I feel. But I think humans do. Jake's heart was beating faster. He had been trying not to think about his own feelings, telling himself it was just trauma bonding, just the intensity of near-death experiences. But he knew better. He had started caring about Zarinth the moment she laughed for the first time. Maybe even before that. The word is probably care, Jake said. Or maybe affection. Humans have many words for different types of feelings. But they all mean that someone has become important to you. That their happiness matters as much as your own. Then I care about you, Zarinth said. And their happiness matters to me. But I do not know if what I feel is real, or if it is just the bond forcing me to feel this way. He had asked himself the same question. I think the bond just gave us an excuse to spend time together. What we feel now, that is real. That is us, not the bond. Before Zarinth could respond, an alert chimed on their wrist displays. The council was summoning them, immediately. They walked to the council chambers together, their hands almost touching, but not quite. The massive doors opened to reveal all 5 council members waiting. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Less hostile, more curious. Krevithar spoke first. Commander Reynolds. Zarinth, the council has reviewed your mission in its entirety. We have analyzed every tactical decision, every moment of combat, every choice you made. Jake braced himself for judgment. Your equal partnership, Krevithar continued, resulted in a 300% efficiency increase over traditional Valorian pairs. You completed a mission rated 420 warriors with only 2. The breeding station is destroyed. Coalition intelligence estimates this will delay Kreth operations in this sector by at least 6 months. Sharvex leaned forward. More importantly, we observed something unprecedented. You command. Part 1. The misunderstanding, Reynolds, held a defensive position far longer than our combat models predicted. You should have fallen in 90 seconds. You held for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Why? Because Zaranth needed me too, Jake said simply. Partners do not quit, not when someone is counting on them. And you, Zaranth Sharvix continued. You reached your position and then chose to fight back toward Commander Reynolds instead of securing the extraction point. You violated tactical efficiency to protect someone you claim as your equal, not your subordinate. Explain. Because he would have done the same for me. Because equality means neither of us is expendable. Because fighting together makes us both stronger than fighting alone, according to hierarchy. The council members looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Finally, Krefthar stood. The council has made a decision. What you have demonstrated is not traditional Valorian doctrine. It violates 10,000 years of cultural practice. It challenges our most fundamental beliefs about strength and hierarchy. He paused, and it worked better than anything we have seen before. Jake felt hope rising in his chest. Therefore, Krevithar continued, the Council recognizes the bond between Commander Jake Reynolds and Zaranth as legitimate. Furthermore, we are creating a new classification, Equal Partnership Bond. This bond carries the same honor as traditional shield twin bonds, but operates under different principles. Principles we will study. You are creating a new law, Zaranth asked, clearly shocked. For us? Not just for you, Sharvek said. For the Coalition. Other species have expressed interest in this human concept of equality. The Telerons, the Zithams, even some younger Valorian warriors. If this partnership model can improve combat effectiveness as dramatically as your mission suggests, we would be fools not to investigate it. Of course, the Cold Council member added, this is experimental. You two will serve as the prototype, the test case. You will be watched constantly, analyzed. If this partnership fails, if it proves inferior to traditional methods, the equal partnership bond will be dissolved and never attempted again. We understand, Jake said. We will not fail. See that you do not, Krefthar said. But there was something in his eyes that might have been approval or amusement. Dismissed. Jake and Zaranth walked out of the council chambers in stunned silence. It was not until they reached the observation deck, looking out at the stars, that either of them spoke. They actually did it, Zaranth said. They changed their laws. For us, not for us, Jake corrected. For everyone. We just showed them it was possible. They stood together in comfortable silence. Finally, Zaranth spoke again. Jake, when I asked what you wanted that first day, you said me. You claimed it was a joke. But I need to know now. Seriously. What do you want? Jake thought about that. About everything that had happened. About the battles and the fear and the moments of connection. About how Zaranth had changed from a terrifying alien warrior into someone he cared about deeply. I want you to choose for yourself, Jake said finally. Not because of the bond. Not because of honor or duty or council orders. What do you want, Zaranth? If you could choose freely, what would you choose? Zaranth was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached up and unsealed her helmet. She removed it completely, something Valorians only did in front of those they trusted absolutely. Her face was angular and sharp, with high cheekbones and those glowing amber eyes. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien and completely familiar at the same time. I want to see where this strange human concept of equality takes us, she said softly. I want to keep fighting beside you, learning from you, teaching you about my culture while I learn about yours. I want. She hesitated, struggling with words her language did not quite have. I want to be with you. As a partner? As an equal? As whatever else we choose to become? How? Jake smiled. That sounds like a good plan. There is one problem, Zaranth said. Valorian courtship rituals are very different from human ones. I do not know how to do this correctly. Neither do I, Jake admitted. Human courtship with aliens is not exactly covered in standard military training. But I think that is okay. We have been making up new rules since the moment we met. Why stop now? Zaranth smiled. It was getting easier for her, that expression. More natural? Making up new rules. The council would be horrified. The council just invented a new type of bond for us. I think they are getting used to change. They stood together, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kreth were regrouping. New battles waited. But right now, in this moment, Jake and Zaranth were just two people who had found something unexpected in the chaos of war. A message chimed on the observation deck's display. It was from Coalition Command. A new assignment. A mixed human-Valorian unit was being formed, and they wanted Jake and Zaranth to lead it. The first equal partnership command in Coalition history. Looks like we are not done making history, Jake said. Zaranth replaced her helmet, sealing it with practiced efficiency. When she spoke, her voice carried through the helmet speakers, but Jake could hear the smile in it. Good, I was getting bored. They walked toward the command center together, not as commander and shield twin, not as dominant and subordinate, but as equals. As partners, as two people who had accidentally created something new and were brave enough to see where it led. Behind them, through the observation window, the stars shone. Endless possibilities stretched out into the void. And for the first time in either of their lives, Jake and Zaranth felt like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Together, the end.